Right, so hello, welcome to Brand Heroes and Villains for episode 2. I'm really excited to be here again. We had such a phenomenal feedback from the last episode when we talk about all kinds of brands. No one escapes our attention this time, and I'm going to introduce our guests as we go round. So this time, Sarah, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Sweeney-Marshall. I'm a sales professional.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And Precious.
Hi everyone, I'm Precious Zimbi Kalwanga. I'm a partner in Queensbury and also director in Perspective.
Marvellous. And our special guest for today, Pete, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm Pete Morgan. My company is Monkey Pants Productions. We're media training and podcast production and training company.
Fantastic. So we're all going to be on our best behaviour today for and goodness. Okay, and I'm Keith Roselle. I'm a sales trainer and also a visiting lecturer with Aston Business School. Now, from the first episode, you'll know the format, but what we're going to do, we've got some heroes and villains to bring to your attention. We drew straws beforehand, and I'm going to go first, and I'll be followed up with some lively debate afterwards. So I want to talk about the A-levels fiasco, and I know a lot of people will be rolling their eyes at this point and saying, well, you know, that's gone and that's done. But is it actually? It may have gone quiet, but I think this is exactly the time that we should be examining sort of what, why happened, etc., etc. Okay, so my exam question is: was it fair that the head of Ofqual, which is the body, of course, that regulates exam results, was made to stand down as opposed to the minister in charge, the Secretary of State for Education, Gavin Williamson? That's my point. So the government, if you remember, was forced to apologise for the A-levels fiasco that resulted in 40% of students receiving worse grades than predicted. Disadvantaged students were most seriously affected. Something like 4.8% of them were further downgraded. Private school pupils disproportionately benefited from the algorithm. Something like 2.3% of them were upgraded in terms of performance. The very algorithm that was designed originally to combat grade inflation. As a result of that, university admissions were thrown into chaos, and some personal friends of ours, their daughter was due to go to university, and within 24 hours found out she couldn't go there, had to go and do something else. So, you know, this really hit close to home. And I think most seriously of all, the public's confidence in the exam system was seriously undermined and plummeted. So the research that I've done for this, and I've cross-checked both online with the FT, credible publications as well, The Guardian included. Ofqual seems to have been given an impossible task, said one source close to that process. The Secretary of State was told Ofqual to limit grade inflation whilst giving candidates the grades they deserved, which sounds like a really interesting line, but actually it's in direct conflict, so it's mutually incompatible. And meanwhile, Lord Faulkner, who's a Labour peer, argued that ministers and Ofqual would have been aware of at least 3 breaches in the law in the standardisation formula used. That was way back in June, something like 10 weeks before the exam results are released. And the chair of Ofqual, Roger Taylor, threatened to quit unless Gavin Williamson publicly backed Ofqual and disclosed that it was actually Ofqual that was behind the U-turn that salvaged millions of those student grades, and not Gavin Williamson. So my point there is that Gavin Williamson improperly claimed credit for that U-turn. The government has decided, etc. Now, Roger Taylor's threat to resign carries significant weight with ministers because he's a non-executive chair rather than a standard Ofqual employee. His contract doesn't have the same constraints, and that means he's free to divulge all of those communications with ministers and criticise the government if he were to leave office. And the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, called on the government to scrap Ofqual's fatally flawed system. and further accused Nick Gibb of grossly misleading all these students after he promised them that any downgrades would only be by 1 grade. Figures later from Ofqual showed that around 24,000 results were lowered by more than 1 grade, in some cases 2 or 3 grades. So you would think that they'd have gone this year of all extraordinary years for the let's keep it really simple approach, given all the other stuff that was going on. If you're in Prince 2, at all, project management, you would know that stuff. This has done untold damage to students' health, mental health, caused anxiety amongst parents too. The knock-on effects to university administration's process, beg your pardon, is huge. Now, I know we're in very difficult, uncharted waters, but it does seem as though that they just didn't see all of this fiasco coming. And the public, parents and pupils need to know the truth of what happened and why, so that we can have full confidence next summer when the next round of results is due. So here's my point. Gavin Williamson, as Secretary of State, got it wrong. And he's the equivalent of the salesman said it will work, so it'll all be okay. And that's what I can't understand. So responsible behaviours in high office. He should have accepted responsibility and gone. And it's not for the first time on Williamson's watch. So what does it take for a minister to resign? Now that's my villainous point, just in case you wondered which of those brackets that was falling into. That would be on the villain side. And very briefly, was it right for Sally Collier, the head of Ofqual, who most people won't be aware of that name, but she's the kind of person in the civil service that's just worked diligently away, delivering stuff in public service, in this case for Ofqual, but she's been across many departments before. And despite her protestations and protestations of her department, she still tried to deliver what somebody else said was an incompatible brief. Years of good public service, and she's the only one to go. That doesn't quite ring true for me. So she's gone. She's been really dignified. You've heard nothing from her since. It's a quiet exit. What a way for a career to end. I think that's a real shame. I think she's displayed heroic dignity, actually, as a result of that. I'm going to pause for breath now. Let me know what you think. Who wants to go first? Precious, you look like you've got something.
Fresh off the mark, right? Do you know? I think that for me, I think you've probably given the hero and the villain appropriately, quite frankly. Yeah, the scapegoat of fiasco, that willingness that a government would make catastrophic mistakes like that, given the fact that we're already in a pandemic. People were already on edge, particularly students, and relying on an algorithm, not taking into account any of the achievements that children had made over the years, and actually not even relying on the teachers. For me, it was unfathomable, because I couldn't understand why the teachers are the people that know the students' capability. Why refer to an algorithm? It's not been tested. You test it in a time where you don't really have any confidence, in my view, that it's actually reliable, then proven that it wasn't reliable, and then the backtrack. It should not have been one person being a scapegoat. I think it should have been, there should have been a proper internal investigation that should have had the people that had made the ultimate decision to use the algorithm put to task. So that's my view in that. I'll stop talking for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, can I ask you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I immediately thought when the A-level thing came out is one of the kind of final nails in the coffin of Nick Clegg and the Liberal Democrats as a party was when he did the U-turn on student fees. And that's the problem, that when you do something against such a large set of people, so students, you're not only affecting their voting decisions, that's one generation, but also their parents who care and love about them, which is another voting decision. So what the government have done here is they've basically annoyed, upset, and badly affected, negatively affected 2 generations at least, because they could well be grandparents, great-grandparents, we could be looking at several generations who will remember this when it comes to the vote. And like I say, we saw what it did. Nick Clegg was the kingmaker. He was the golden boy. This is it. He's going to lead us to. We're all going to take his hand and walk off. And when he did that, and then obviously became kind of the deputy leader of the government and worked alongside David Cameron, that certainly turned a lot of Liberal Democrats off. But the student fee thing, so making mistakes with students but trying to dress it up as a thought out process or a decision, or pointing the finger in the wrong direction, will always stick in people's minds. And I think that's what the education minister is going to find out the next time that there's in the next general election, that people have incredibly long memories. And it will be, if he doesn't bring it up, which of course he won't, but it will be brought up, because it was such a misstep, and that is underselling it. That's understating what happened to call it a misstep.
That's a great shout on the tuition fees, long memories, two generations of voters. Love that point. Sarah?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo a little bit of what's already been said. I think if you're going to lead or take the lead on something, if you're going to make a mistake and know about it, take accountability for it, hold your hands up. That would be better than like pretending you didn't know about something and letting it happen anyway. So the fact that there was at least 3 breaches that he knew about and then let that go through in the first place, it's just absurd that would even happen. There's going to be some consequence, or something's not going to land quite right if you know the process is not right in the first place. It was never going to work, was it? And then the students to suffer at the back, like on the back foot of that. Like you go to school, you prepare all your school life to finish school and move on to the next step. It's not just a little thing like, oh, it's me exams, let's move on. You prepare your whole life for it, and it sends you into adult life. And then to get that wrong, and then maybe it's having to reapply for a different university, and the time it takes for the application process, there'll have been so much waste and then additional time taken to get people where they needed to be. It's just, the whole situation sucks, doesn't it?
Because I know there's a few students who are like sons and daughters of friends of mine, and a couple of them were like, we were kind of told, don't worry about the mocks. So we just didn't put as much effort in. We didn't revise. And that's what we're going to be judged on now. How is that fair? Yeah. So, yeah, it is. And Sarah said it exactly right. That kind of taking of response, it's good leadership. And I always am amazed that the political leaders, not just of our country, but of many other countries, don't kind of put their hands up and go, do you know what? You're right. Listen, I'm fallible. We all are. We all make mistakes. I've made a mistake. I'm going to learn from it. Here's what I'm going to do to try and make this better. Because I always think, well, I think I'd probably have more respect for them if they were just honest and said, yeah, I mucked up.
That's a really good shout. Yeah, sorry is not a word you hear very often, but the phrase that I did hear just a few weeks ago is sometimes, particularly when it comes to government and big projects, is a phrase called, sometimes some projects are doomed to success.
Yeah,
they're going to happen, come what may.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing not having to worry about a P&L is. Okay. Anyway, listen, thank you for getting stuck in there. We're gonna hand over now to Sarah, and Sarah's gonna come in with her subject. Sarah.
Yeah, so what I want to discuss is the whole Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So in my head, I'm still struggling whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. So I think this is why I want to discuss it, to get your points of view as well. So from the off, I totally understand why the government would want to put that much of a cash injection into the hospitality industry. It was on its knees. I think 80% of the hospitality industry had stopped trading in April, which is massive. and over 1 million workers were furloughed on the scheme, so that they needed to put something in to get it up and running. So totally understand why it was put in place. So they set a budget of £500 million to encourage people to go back out into restaurants, cafes, local businesses to support and help out the situation. So the total figures haven't been released yet. They're not going to be released until, I think it's the 16th of October. But up until that point, they're already £22 million over budget. So in my head, it's like, right, so then where does that bill fall? What's going to be increased, or who's going to fork out a little bit more to pay for that additional spending? And then when I looked into it, although it was a great thing, people went and they absolutely did support. But as soon as that scheme stopped, so did the people. So to me, it drove really greedy behaviour. And the flip side of that, when people were going out, eating out in restaurants and things like that, there was £155 million, I think it was, spent less in supermarkets because people were going out instead. If you think about the spend on top of that, if you think about all the fresh produce and everything like that in the supermarket, how much of that just went to waste just because somebody wanted to go out and have a cheap meal? So there's kind of some bits there which I think it could have been done a little bit differently. Again, now the government pushed everybody out. They've done a complete U-turn and told everybody to come back in. I know I'm in local lockdown from tomorrow, but Newcastle has been for a little while now. So they reckon within Newcastle by December, 10,000 jobs in the hospitality industry have been lost. So was all that kind of money thrown at it the right thing to do when kind of you're then doing a U-turn and pulling it all back away? So yeah, did it kind of do what it was supposed to do? I have got no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting one. Sorry, Keith, go ahead.
No, not at all. This may not surprise you, but I did take advantage of Eat Out to Hell, but for two reasons actually. I do feel as though it's if you can do something to contribute somehow to your local economy, I believe all of us, if you're fortunate enough to be in the position that you can do something, then you should, because after all, you're the spirit of that agreement, which I think Sarah really put across really well there. The spirit of that was the British bulldog. Let's get out there, let's spend some money, let's try and float that sector, which is frankly decimated, and we did try and do that very much. Now, I did think it was so successful that actually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday might become the new weekend. Was it all going to fall off? Was Friday and Saturday nights going to be, of the past, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would be the new weekend? It was, and for a month it genuinely felt that way. So we did take part. I was a little uncomfortable, if I'm honest, that some restaurants were better at observing COVID conditions than others, and we didn't go back to those. But in essence and in the spirit that was intended, we absolutely took part and tried to do our bit, so to speak, and some cheap bills at the end of the evening, which was wonderful to see. Sorry, Precious, what are your thoughts?
No, I actually concur with what you said. So Sarah, what you've said, I think is really key. There's two sides to the coin here. There's a side about the government injecting money into the economy and trying to support businesses that have been under a lot of pressure. So hospitality, like you rightly said, from April, there was nothing happening. There was no movement in hospitality. The flip side is, yes, it then encouraged us. I participated in it, probably not as much as I would have wanted to, but I did participate in the Eat Out to Help Out. And it was great. But my thing is, it's unsustainable. It is absolutely unsustainable. So the heroic side of it for me is, yes, it allowed the injection, it allowed movement. It actually even allowed confidence for people to go out and have meals, inadvertently because it was cheaper to do that, but people started getting out of their houses. The villainous side for me is what the hospitality industry has never, well, pre-COVID, we all know about 2-for-1 meals. We all know about, 2-for-1 between Monday and Thursday. The government didn't support that. The hospitality industry decided that, that's a good initiative. You have a play on how cheap a night out is going to be. People would be interested to go out. And it was out of Friday and Saturday, there's no 2-for-1, but from Sunday to Thursday, there's 2-for-1. So I think, yes, the government could have injected, but actually the hospitality industry in itself has been quite creative in terms of how to drive numbers into their restaurants. We're now stuck with a bill of X amount, and it may come in our taxes. It may come in corporation tax, it may come in income tax, it can come in various taxes. Council tax might go up. And it's unsustainable, but on the flip side, it's what the government felt they needed to do. But the hospitality industry, in my mind, would have revived itself. They've done it before.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the thing I would say is, what would have been the right action for the government to take? If not this, because some people didn't like the eat out to help out. They didn't like that it was just Monday to Wednesday. And they, again, like both Precious and Sarah have said, it's kind of a sticking plaster in a way, because once it finishes, people aren't going to go out anymore. So what should they have done? What was this, apart from taking the magic money from the magic money tree, that all this money, and as Precious has said, we're all going to have to swallow at some point in another way. What could they have done apart from, well, listen, those that can survive are going to survive, and those that can't, I'm really sorry, we're just going to see a decimate. Because again, this is the thing, we don't know what the next 6 months are going to bring. We don't know what the next 12 months are going to bring. All of that could have been for naught. So we could be seeing a rise in taxes for nothing, and the hospitality industry as a whole could be decimated. And if it is, whilst it's not pleasant, it kind of the natural cycle of things, taking COVID-19 into account. And I'm just wondering, because when it was mentioned, I remember thinking, actually, yeah, that's a great idea, but I can see that the objections that some people had, but it was like, I don't have a better one, so let's go with that. And I'm just wondering, has anyone got something that they think, actually, that's what we should have done with the hospitality sector?
I just go back to that whole adage that prior to COVID, hospitality industry was already coming up with initiatives that made eating out economically viable for some families, with the 2-for-1. So yes, COVID's come in. COVID was going to cushion the blow of lost income, but actually, the hospitality industry has always been quite creative in bringing numbers into their stores. So it should have maybe been a grant or something. It should be means tested then. I don't know. Let's look at each organization in the hospitality industry that has had the biggest hit. Everybody had a hit, but maybe some people had it more.
Yeah,
some people haven't opened.
Chosen to continue with it without the help from the government. So if they could do that anyway, why haven't they done that without taking free cash?
Yes,
that's a really good point. I mean, the private sector is very good at innovating and in accordance with market conditions. I mean, that's what it does. You shouldn't have to pay people to collaborate, but we won't get onto Horizon 2020. We'll leave that for another day. But anyway, so thank you again for really getting stuck in with that. You definitely can't rely on the government for jobs. That is absolutely for certain, for sure. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Let's move on now. And Precious, do you want to come in with your subject?
So my subject is either going to be embraced or controversial. So I'm I'm going to touch on an entrepreneur who, over the years, I've admired. So yeah, I will openly say an entrepreneur that I've admired. I'm going to talk about Richard Branson today. And the reason why I'm going to talk about Richard Branson is twofold. He's an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. He came out being compared as what does success look like. Elon Musk was on there. Mark Zuckerberg was on there. all entrepreneurs that have started organizations and either failed along their journey and succeeded. He succeeded probably 75% of his businesses. And that's phenomenal for a serial entrepreneur in my mind. So Richard Branson at the moment is in the airline industry. We've just talked about the hospitality industry and it having injection. The airline industry hasn't had much of that. In fact, they've fallen flat on their faces, and a lot of them have closed or completely shut down. TUI went probably before COVID, but a number of airlines have faced the brunt, and the airline industry is shrinking daily. We're having lists on destinations that are now under the quarantine list. It doesn't help. So Richard Branson, for me, he's faced, in his heroic journey as an entrepreneur, for me, he's reinvented himself consistently. His airline industry started, he started off with 4 airlines. The Gulf War happened. Jet fuel prices went up. You know, he still survived. He's faced the brunt of going against the national airline, and he still survived. And now he's asking for money from the government, which I feel for me slightly was the villainous side. So you've been surviving all these ups and downs, etc. So for me, from an entrepreneurial point of view, absolutely a hero. He's an exemplar person in my mind of how to continuously reinvent yourself and to grow your portfolio and be resilient. So he's come up and said, you know, I need some money from the UK government, Australian government. That's failed, and he's again reinvented himself slightly and set up a special purpose acquisition company, which a lot of investors are doing, where they're putting money in and using shareholder money to be able to support initiatives. And he's using that to support his airline industry, amongst other competitions. So let me bring it right back. Is it villainous for a multi-million pound, probably billionaire entrepreneur who's proven over the years that he can reinvent and survive all this time, to reach out to the government to get support to keep his businesses afloat? Is that a villainous act, or is that an act of an entrepreneur trying to keep people employed, businesses afloat, in the similar manner that the government has supported Sarah's subject matter, which was hospitality?
Yeah, it's a great shout.
I mean, I like Richard Branson, but yes, I think it's a villainous thing. I don't think he should have done it. And I think it's quite, it doesn't sit square with me. I mean, his value is what, 4.2 billion US dollars. The man owns an island. You know, the money he's got down the back of his sofa would probably keep the 4 of us in, you know, the best liquor we could find and the decent food for the rest of our natural lives with ease. And the money that he's asking for as a bailout is something that, you know, all right, he might not be able to fund it all himself. But again, kind of going back to the hospitality thing of, I think we've got to come round to the fact that business, industry, right across the board, is going to shrink because it can't survive. It can't have money poured into it. And if he's this great entrepreneur, which, as I say, I like the guy. Listen, he's a fellow beardie, so he's always, you know, when we meet at our regular club meetings, he's always very chatty. But he must know that there's going to have to be people let go, shrinkage of operations. It cannot survive the way it is. And also, like we've just been saying with the eat out to help out thing, throwing money at this hasn't worked. It's not worked. And I think there was that hypocritical note, but also that note of surprise of, he must know that. And I know he's very press hungry and he loves getting in front of the newspapers. You know, he is the figurehead of this business, which is, again, he's excellent at. But I don't think that's why he did it. I don't want to think that he's not thought the process through to the end. But
which businessman wouldn't want to get injection if the government is is injecting money in other sectors. You see, this is why I think that, you know, I said he was a villain, but in my mind, he's a businessman. He's taking a chance. He is looking for injection from the government, like every other industry. Everybody is looking to
absolutely. But if your industry, if your business needed, let's say, 30 million, and the government said, okay, I can give you 10, they might as well have given you nothing, because all they're going to do is help you a third of along the way. That's like you hanging off a cliff and me standing 10 foot back and go, well, I can lean forward 3 foot. I can't come and meet you all the way. And it's like, well, because the government are never going to go, absolutely, we will. Because if they do it with Virgin, then everyone comes out of the woodwork, and that's it. You know, all bets are off, and they're going to have to start producing money for everybody. And I understand what you're saying, that, you know, listen, he's a leader, and he's a good leader. But I think there was a better move.
You should just not get the money, Pete, in your view, right?
If I thought that it wouldn't lead on to the next and to the next and to the next airline, to the next hospitality company, to the next big industrial company, to ask him for money, then absolutely give him the money. Let's save it. But it wouldn't. And where would it end?
Absolutely.
Shareholding. Could the government not have shareholding in his business? He wouldn't let go, would he?
They'll have 50% of his island.
Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Richard Branson, for me, right at the beginning of lockdown, kind of showed his true colours. So for me, the Virgin brand, when you look at it, it's all about employee engagement, giving the employees a voice, really doing the best they can to protect their employees and give them the best future and look after them. And so the employees are bought in. They're absolutely in love with that brand. So when it came to lockdown, and then he decided that he wanted all of his Virgin Atlantic staff to take 8 weeks unpaid leave, I just thought that kind of went totally against the grain of what the brand was all about. Like we've said already, he's got a cash, well, not a cash pile, but his net worth is $4.2 billion US, and his cash pile is estimated to be, I've got it jotted down, 520 million.
Oh,
so that's,
poor
like,
guy.
that's not stuff that's tied up in investments, or that's like cash that he's got or should have to, in this instance, save his own company. Why wouldn't you?
Personal wealth versus business operations.
That's some sofa, isn't it?
It really is. But, and again, I know what Precious is saying, but these are incredible times. And so why wouldn't, if he's willing to stand up and ask somebody else for the money, why wouldn't he? And, you know, but again, I guess with him asking staff to take 8 weeks unpaid leave, kind of goes with what I was saying before of sometimes there's nasty decisions to be made, and a good leader just stands up and goes, listen, this isn't ideal, but I think we need to do this to save the company.
Exactly. And I don't want to derail that conversation, because I think that was a great subject to talk about. He's a very likable person. It's hard not to like Richard Branson. My you know, if I could have almost supported, not because of him, but because of jobs and all, I could have almost supported a bailout for two things. Number one, he doesn't pay his taxes in the UK, and I'm absolutely, you know, adamant that if you make money out of the UK, which largely Virgin Atlantic does, then you should contribute to that infrastructure which comes from government. And you disagreeing, Pete?
Well, yeah, because he's not asking for it for him. He's not saying, I don't live in the country, please give me money. He's saying my company that works and operates out of the UK needs this money to continue.
Yes.
So give it the money. That's what he's asking for. He's not asking for, you know, I'd like another villa.
He's not asking for a personal loan, is he?
No.
He's asking for
He doesn't need one of them.
No, well, no, he doesn't.
Well, isn't it, at some stage, this is at least about optics. This is about, I've made a load of, don't forget, whilst he may be in that financial position, there was a time at which he wasn't. And he was making all the profits. Then what do you think contributed to that 4.2 billion? It may not have been 100% out of the UK economy, but certainly a substantial proportion was. The other aspect of my argument is that 49% of Virgin, I think it's Delta that own 49%, Delta or United, can't remember which, but anyway, so surely if there's going to be a bailout, half of it should have come from perhaps the US government. That was kind of my point. Sarah, is there anything you want to wade in on? And
so I think he's gone full 360. I'm not sure how certain I am with what I'm going to say, but I'm sure he has invested £250 million back into his company recently. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I've got no idea, but he's probably gone away, reflected and thought, actually, I haven't come across the way I wanted to, or that wasn't really a good idea or whatever. But I do think he's gone kind of 360 and done what he should have done in the first place.
I think with any business savvy man, you've got to look at your options. He was looking at his options. And
you try it, you don't ask, you don't get, do you? It's as simple as that.
He's got a business that's operating out of the UK. The UK government is supporting organizations. I'm going to ask as well. I would ask. I'm going to sit here and say I would ask. But he's now set up this special purpose acquisition vehicle, which is part of that conversation, Sarah, that he's finding investors to put into a fund, which will then support his businesses. It has an expiry period of, if it's not used in 2 years, then it has to be dispersed back. But that's the entrepreneurial side that for me shines, in the sense that he's not had the bailout, but he's thinking outside of the box to say, right, I need to keep my businesses going, so I will set up a special purpose acquisition vehicle to keep that afloat.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good way to round that piece of the debate off. So thank you, Sarah and Precious, for your points thus far. So Pete, looking to you as our guest. By the way, it doesn't mean to say we're going to take it easy on you.
By all means.
So don't be shy. Come on down.
Okay. Well, again, I think mine will be quite divisive. Full transparency. I was a full-time radio producer and presenter for 30 years, up until the beginning of 2017. Still do a little bit of kind of cover work, certainly not since the beginning of this year, since COVID. But for about 10 years, I worked for the BBC. Worked for them full-time as a presenter. Main West Midlands, Birmingham, and Warwickshire. Did some work on 5 Live as well. And I think, again, like I know, we've talked about kind of things being both heroic and villainous in the same, and I think the BBC are absolutely a part of that. I've not been brainwashed by the BBC. I am well aware of their shortcomings. Any business that has got 22,500 employees isn't going to get everything right. I think as an organisation, they don't always get things right. But from an online perspective and from a local perspective, I felt that when the lockdown happened, they really tried to tell all of the story. So when I talk about online and when I talk about local, what I don't talk about is the BBC News channel, which desperately has to fill 24 hours of news. They can't go, listen, we've kind of told this story quite a bit. We're going to turn off for a couple of days. Here's a picture of some kittens. We'll be back on Wednesday. They've just got to keep telling, and they've got to do their, breaking news. Here's the thing that you already knew 3 hours ago, but it's still breaking. Online and local, and again, their online side is broken up into nations and regions and operated on a regional and on a local basis. They really worked hard towards telling the facts, obviously, the actual news that was going on in specific areas, but worked hard to tell the positive stories, including positive business stories, going back to, you know, what both Precious and Sarah have talked about is the innovation of businesses when lockdown happened, in retail, in hospitality, to try and make some money. Yeah, I'm sure that there would have been complaints that they were just advertising, and you know, and pretty much on a local level, that's kind of what they were doing. But they felt that was editorially the best way to go. On a national level, the BBC did their very best to keep the things that sections of the audience liked about the BBC. So when it came to radio, they changed their lineups to make the shows bigger, put people on rotation so that there was a structure in place. If somebody contracted coronavirus and had to be off, well, we've got a contingency plan. We're not just going to have to, you know, play Sounds of Kittens for 3 hours. We've got something that works. Proms in the park still happened. The last night of the proms still happened, albeit in various different ways. From a personal point of view, I'm really pleased that Strictly is still happening. I'm a Strictly mega fan. I could have a stand-up row about that. The villainous side of it goes back to what I was saying before of the BBC News Channel. And it's not just the BBC, but the BBC have to be held up as this paragon of independence. Is the kind of sensationalism of some of the headlines and some of the bylines that were coming out. But on a local level, when the lockdown started to ease, the restructuring of local radio that they had done, they said, right, this seems to be working now, so we're going to keep it like this. And at a stroke, 50, 60, 70 presenters were out of work. And numerous broadcast assistants, junior reporters, senior broadcast journalists. And the phrase I've used is they held up a horse that was really a donkey in a dress. They said it was because it worked when in fact it saves money. And that isn't right. And again, there's lots of private companies that do it, but because it's the BBC and they are always held to a higher standard because they are so transparent, it was just wrong. And I was disappointed in the way that they'd dealt with it. So, but yeah, so the BBC for me, they are both heroic and villainous in, you know, certainly on that local employment aspect.
Great shout. You avoided that saying of the unique way that the BBC is funded.
Yeah.
So there we go. I'll table that straight away.
Thanks very much for that.
So you're welcome. Precious, what do you think?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I was listening to you intently, Pete. So for me, yes, since the sensationalizing of the COVID-19 for me, yeah, I have an issue with most TV stations, with that, Sky being one of them. You know, anything that is either making people anxious or, you know, it's just bad news is good news, right? Is it?
Yeah, it is. Of course it is.
There you go. Yeah. So for me, yes, that whole piece about continuously repeating and this and that. I know a lot of people, me being one of them, switched off the television because I was like, you know, I don't want to keep hearing about the numbers going up. But actually, if they didn't report them, oh, we don't know what's going on in the country. So it's again, two sides to the coin. It can be a bit too much because the expectation was we knew COVID numbers were going up. We were expecting the breaking news. The 7 o'clock update was, everybody was waiting to hear, what are we doing? What's going on? But then the villainous side that you mentioned about you know, the donkey dressed as a horse. I love that, by the way. What are they supposed to do? So a lot of organizations during COVID have had to reevaluate their operations.
Yeah, but for the BBC, the money's remaining the same. They know what their money's going to be for the next 5 years, and they've already kind of said, listen, there's going to have to be some reductions, and they'd already talked, and there've been discussions with the unions that there's going to be some reductions. But they saw the chance to make a big, I mean, it was seismic on a local point of view.
Yeah.
And they took that chance in a ruthless way. I felt it was ruthless and it was wrong.
Now, I agree with you. It's not the time to do that because there aren't a lot of jobs out there for people.
No.
So it's really the worst time to try and streamline your business and reduce your costs, because everybody is either employment rates are at record level. So yes, your point about they've got a budget, they can afford it, it's already ring fenced. Why get rid of people now? Totally agree with you. But then when you look at it, other organizations that probably don't have the budget, this is a time where a lot of organizations are reviewing their operations and saying, do you know what, we were slightly inefficient here. Let's bring this back. And there will be casualties, unfortunately. And it's the worst time for casualties. I sympathize with that a lot. I do. And yeah.
And I get that, but sorry, Sarah. But I guess the other point that it kind of ties in with is they're reducing, they're taking at least one presenter, sometimes two presenters, because they were double-headed shows in the afternoon. They were taking all of those out of every local radio station in the country. But, Gary Lineker, Zoe Ball, Graham Norton still get a nice big sack of money. And I get that Gary Lineker took a pay cut. Zoe Ball, I think, is now the highest paid person in the BBC, public-facing person of the BBC. Which it matters not one jot to me. Genuinely, it doesn't. And, my wife has worked in the corporate world for years, and she's had to deal with the fact that she's been paid less than her male counterparts. But so I've always had that kind of annoyance within me, but it doesn't bother me that Zoe Ball gets more than Gary Lineker or got more than Chris Evans. She's a radio presenter, and she's presenting what should be the biggest breakfast show in the country. And what we did in our household, and I know a lot of people did, like you said, Precious, people stopped watching the news. So we stopped listening to the Today programme or watching BBC Breakfast because we didn't want that. So we went to national radio, or actually Irish radio was the next one that we did, to just be entertained, because local radio was still having to talk about COVID, because local breakfast shows have to have news content within them. And the only story that was out there or anyone wanted to talk about was COVID-19.
Absolutely. Sarah.
Sorry, Sarah.
What are your thoughts?
So for me, as an individual, I've been through a couple of lean transformations myself within business. So I think if you took COVID out of it, if you've got a business that's set up and you can run it more effectively, more streamlined, without as much waste, why wouldn't you? So yes, you've got the budget, yes, you've got the money, but should you just be employing people and paying people's wages just because you can? It doesn't make sense.
Well, again, see, my thing, the BBC is an unusual corporation because, of course, they're not in it for the profit. They have a set amount that they know they're going to be receiving, and obviously there's additional revenue brought in when they sell things overseas. BBC America is a commercial arm, and they have a retail arm of the selling of DVDs and merchandise and things like that. But they don't work like a normal business. And the person who suffers is the absolute consumer that they are targeted at. Those listeners built a connection and a relation. Any good radio presenter, and we've all had these, that when we were growing up, we would have listened maybe to your local breakfast show or to your Radio 1 breakfast show, and that person you listened to was your friend. And if all of a sudden that person was taken away, and that was because the company wanted to save money, that would be an incredibly bitter pill to swallow.
And okay, that is a really good shout. Sorry, Sarah, I jumped in front of you there.
No, that's all right. And I totally agree. It's not a nice situation for people to lose their jobs. And yes, absolutely, people build relationships, but that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Waste is waste, and it shouldn't be there, or not in my eyes anyway.
Yeah, so that was right between the eyes for me then, Sarah, which is this should be lean and, I want to say lean and mean. I probably don't mean quite like that, but certainly.
It is, though. A lean transformation is
lean and mean.
Not often I say that and get away with it, but
Very efficient.
But thank you. Yes, efficient. Yes, absolutely brilliant. So listen, really enjoyed that. If I may, I'm going to try and sum up everything that we've gone through in the last sort of 45 minutes or so. Please jump in if I've missed anything out. So I started off talking about A-levels and Ofqual, and was it right that Sally Collier went? She did so. She was, for me, a heroine in the way that she did so in a really dignified fashion with no fuss, very quiet. I think wrongly asked to leave. For me, the villain side of that was definitely Gavin Williamson, not for the first time, who I think has actually misled a number of different stakeholder groups, including all those students that would have been made most anxious. Pete landed a great point, I think, around Nick Clegg, the kingmaker. Will the Lib Dems ever learn about, coming back and, biting students like that? And they've probably caused themselves several generations of anxiety around voting Lib Dem again, and that's going to cost them, I'm sure. Sarah made a great point also that in all of this melee, the fiasco, we actually lost sight on the most important group of all, which is the leaders and the contributors of tomorrow, which is of course those students. So really well done on that. And Sarah, then we moved on to Sarah with the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and Precious, I must say that you very kindly agreed to pick up another subject instead of Eat Out to Help Out. So I would say, but Sarah, I thought, did a wonderful job with this. Now, I hadn't realised you came out with some great numbers about that scheme costing, or £500 million was provisioned for that, and it went £22 million over budget, and that's not the kind of target that you really want to exceed. Certainly not when it comes to effective the public's cash at the end of the day. Now, you also mentioned, so whilst that scheme was meant with all good intent, in good faith, if you like, there was £155 million spent less in supermarkets than they would have otherwise expected to have been spent. So there was a redistribution of cash. There was unintended consequences as a result of making that decision, because of course if we're dining out, we're not dining at home. That makes a lot of sense. So Precious made some great points around that, which is again, I suppose what an economist would call a spillover benefit. So not only did it breathe some life into the hospitality sector, it actually gave people some confidence, of course. I hadn't actually considered that, but some people will not have left their houses for literally months. And all of the stuff, the angst, the anxiety that goes with that. So maybe that will have in some way offset the £22 million over budget. We might have picked up that bill elsewhere in the economy for mental health, for counselling, for all, the NHS will somehow have picked up that tab. So that's a really good point to land. Thank you for that. But at its heart, it's unsustainable. That model, and we've got, it's sometimes it's a bit like having children who keep coming back and asking for money. At some stage, they've got to stand on their own 2 feet, and no, it's down to you. And business, the private sector should always kind of be like that. You shouldn't be able to rely on the government for your jobs. Now, Precious landed a fantastic guy, really, I think, in Richard Branson, but on this particular occasion got two different sides. So, of course, with the airline industry coming in, asking for loads of cash to bail out his airline, which just didn't feel quite right. Again, private sector organisation, and did that fly in the face? That was a pun unintended. Did that fly in the face of a $4.2 billion net worth and that great big sofa with, Sarah said, I think 500 odd million pounds down the back, or dollars, whatever it would be. I wonder, therefore, is cheap money, cheap credit, historically cheap, is that masking some unviable business models out there? And are there companies that would have gone to the wall anyway at some stage? It's just that COVID has hastened their, or somehow unmasked those inefficiencies or those unviable businesses. We also heard that Virgin in particular is 49% owned, or Virgin Atlantic is 49% owned by Delta. So really they should have at least borne 49% of the bailout costs, I guess. And Sarah quite rightly pointed out that Branson showed his true colours there. I made the point, actually, I'd prefer people to pay their taxes in the UK. That's just a pedestal I'm afraid I'm always on. Precious very kindly and very rightly countered that with, actually, do you know what? We're talking about UK jobs. And of course you are right. There's just something that sticks in my gut around that. And then Pete, our guest. So thank you, Pete. Pete talked about BBC, disclosure, that worked there for a long time, 22,000 employees. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of affection for the BBC. I'm one of them, big fan of the BBC News. That's somber suits, you know, and somber dress. Sophie Rayworth, of course, always dresses highly appropriately. I just go to them because there's trust, because at the end of the day, it's trust. And I do feel like, feel free to jump in, Precious or Sarah, if you feel differently. I just kind of feel like I trust what that news says. Maybe
You're being patriotic here, Keith. You're being super patriotic.
Well, maybe, but also might be a generational thing as well, where there wasn't so much, shall we say, competition in that marketplace. Let's not go down there for the minute. But people are also making the point of, at a local level, now the word that I wrote, Pete, I don't know if this is too strong, was that the BBC were being disingenuous in making those restructures, if you like. This will work better during COVID.
And I guess that's the thing, and I think that probably needs clarification on my part, is that publicly they have said this has worked, and we believe it's a better listen for the station, and it makes the station more streamlined. My perception, and the perception of some of the people who still work within the BBC, is that it is purely money saving. That you can't, not every station will benefit from the complete lifting out of a presenter.
Yeah.
Some stations possibly, but not every station. It just seems a little bit too neat as an excuse. And I realised I didn't think I kind of said that's my opinion and the opinion of the people who I've spoken to.
Brilliant. Okay, so I got that. Thank you. Stand slightly corrected there. But at a national level, the BBC still made it happen. Now, Precious came up with, you know, there are always going to be casualties in this historic, I mean, it is an interesting time to be alive, right? In terms of the world and what the world's going through. But there are always going to be casualties when it comes down to restructures. Of course, that's part of life. Sarah also landed that real poke in the eye with businesses, organizations, just they especially when they're taxpayer funded, probably almost more importantly, they should be lean and mean and efficient. I hope I've captured the essence of what we've been going through. My great thanks to regular guests Precious and Sarah Sweeney Marshall for coming on the show, Precious Zambika Luanga, but also our special guest Pete Morgan from Monkey Pants. Did I say that right? Monkey Pants.
Yes, Monkey. You don't have to say it quite with a Lancashire accent.
Okay.
I mean, you can, just however you say Monkey Pants is the way to say it.
Luckily, Pete doesn't know where I live. But anyway, but thank you very much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed it. I hope you have. We'd love some feedback. Hit subscribe if you get a chance. And we'll be coming at you with episode 3 very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye now.